The House of Tax Policy Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Neely.
Here.
Representatives Farhat.
Here.
Rixey.
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Witset.
Here.
Grant.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Van Workum.
Here.
Markkinen.
Here.
Outman. Tisdale.
Here.
Hoadley.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Vice Chair Farhat makes a motion to adopt the minutes from the November 8, 2023 meeting. Without any objections, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have the adoption of the proposed rules on public testimony, testimony on vote House Bill 4361, Senate Bill 415 and 416, with votes on substitute H2 to House Bill 4361 and testimony on House Bill 4708. Today, I am proposing an additional committee rule regarding testimony to clarify our procedures. You each have a copy of the proposed rules at your seat. Rep. Grant moves to adopt committee rules. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to adopt the committee rules, Chair Neely.
Yes.
Representatives Farhat.
Yes.
Rixey.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Witset.
Yes.
Grant.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Van Workum.
Yes.
Markkinen.
Yes.
Outman. Tisdale.
Yes.
Hoadley.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 11 yeas, 0 nays, 0 passed. The committee rules are adopted.
Thank you. Now we will take up testimony on Senate Bill 415 and 416. Senator, we have someone else. Renee from his office will be testifying today. Whenever you're ready.
I'd like to thank you, Chair Neely, and members of the Tax Policy Committee for allowing me to testify today on behalf of Senator Kleinfeld and our Senate Bill 415 and 416 that are tie-barred. These bills are a reintroduction of 2017 and 18 legislative session. Together, Senate Bill 415 and 416 would remove the exemption certificate requirement to a seller who is a microbrewer licensed by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. I am, of course, available, as well as our office, for any questions that you may have. I thank you again for your time. But I believe Scott Graham from the Michigan Brewers Guild is prepared to testify and provide more expertise on this subject matter. Thank you very much, committee, for allowing me to speak.
Now we'll ask Scott to come up. And whenever you're ready, you can start.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I appreciate these bills being introduced. As was mentioned, I'm Scott Graham, the Executive Director of the Michigan Brewers Guild, which is the trade association representing the breweries in the state. And this bill kind of streamlines the process. Certain microbrewer licenses have the ability to distribute beer themselves to retail outlets with restrictions. And in doing that beer, then the retailer resells, so there is no sales or use tax required to be paid on that bill. And right now they're required to keep an exemption form on file, and this simply changes it so that all they need is the retailer license number as part of their record keeping. And this brings the requirement for the self-distributing microbrewery in line with what a regular wholesaler does. And in this case, the microbrewer is performing the same function as a wholesaler on a very limited basis. And this brings the requirements in line and actually streamlines things, makes it simpler and more sensible, in my opinion.
We have any questions? All right, we see there's no questions. Thank you so much for coming in and testifying for us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now we're reading some cards. Supporting of the bill is Amanda West from the Department of Treasury. Now we have Representative Grant make a motion to report Senate Bill 415 out. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Neely,
Yes.
Representatives Farhat,
Yes.
Rixey,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Witset,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Van Workum,
Yes.
Markkinen,
Yes.
Outman, Tisdale,
Yes.
Hoadley.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, and 1 pass. SB 415 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you. Now we have Representative Price make a motion to report SB 4116. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Neely,
Yes.
Representatives Farhat,
Yes.
Rixey,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Witset,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Van Workum,
Yes.
Markkinen,
Yes.
Outman, Tisdale,
Yes.
Hoadley.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, and 1 pass. SB 416 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you. Now we would take up testimony on House Bill 4708. Rep. Farhat. And who's going to be testifying with Rep. Farhat today is Kurt Berryman from Auto Dealer Association.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Tax Policy Committee. Today before us is House Bill 4708, a bill to exempt electric vehicle charging stations from the personal property tax assessment. This would apply to commercial and residential. Right now, we're seeing a big push, and we're seeing a consumer trend towards vehicles that are electric, and we want to make sure that if you are a strip mall, if you're a coffee shop, if you are a personal homeowner who wants to install these at your home, you're not going to be hit on the back end with an increased tax liability. So this would be an exemption. This would make it easier for a store if they want to accommodate to do so without having to pay a repeat increase in their property tax assessment. With me is Kurt Berryman from the Auto Dealers Association. I'm going to let him take it away for a little bit and speak to this bill as well.
Thank you, Representative Farhat, and thanks for introducing this bill, Madam Chair. Appreciate you taking this bill up today. I sit before you today, a 300-pound man that hasn't had breakfast or lunch. So if I get grumpy or pass out, call somebody for me.
Can we take a brief break?
Thank you, Representative. As Representative Farhat said, the EVs kind of came upon us quickly, and I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but for a long time there was a lot of focus on autonomous vehicles. That was going to be the next thing, autonomous vehicles, and then this shift to EVs happened fairly quickly. And unlike a lot of retailers that Representative Farhat mentioned, I represent the auto dealers, the Michigan auto dealers, about 600 members statewide, Detroit auto dealers, about 200 dealers in Southeast Michigan, and the auto show. For dealers, when the EV craze started, I say craze, when the manufacturers made the shift, doing EVs was a mandate for us. Not only a mandate in selling the vehicles, but a mandate in putting these charging stations in. Fast, high-speed charging stations. A lot of dealers around the state had level 2 chargers, maybe some level 1 chargers. But when this push came forward by the manufacturers, and for good reason, arguably, we were presented with a mandate on how many charging stations that we had to put in each dealership. And it ranges, it's different for each manufacturer. It could be 2 high-speed, it could be 6 high-speed, depending on what your location is. So for us, unlike other retailers, this was a mandate. I just left a Chrysler dealers meeting this morning in Troy, which is why I didn't have breakfast. And I took a survey of probably 20 Chrysler dealers there, and I would say the average expenditure for these charging stations that are mandated is about $500,000. Had a couple dealers upwards of $1 million in investment, but $500,000. So, as Representative Farhat said, I think if the state has a goal to encourage EVs, and certainly we've heard from the governor a number of times, to expand the number of charging stations, EVs aren't going to run without them being charged. I think it's a nice step for the state to come in and say that if you put these in, you're not going to be punished with either real or a personal property tax increase on that. I think the House fiscal analysis was good. It said right now that maybe this would cost $1 million. It's because now there's not a lot of charging stations in the ground. But as this expands, and for dealers, I wanted to give an example. Say that Chrysler tells a Chrysler dealer that they need to put in 3 high-speed charging stations. Well, we're going to do that. And you might say, well, why should you get any tax break or benefit on something that you were going to already do? With something like this, where you're going to get an exemption on the personal property or the real property, maybe the dealer's going to put in 6 instead of 3 and have 3 of those opened up to the public, or all of them opened up to the public. So as you know well, tax policy does change behavior. It can change behavior. Representative Brixey, in your area, I mean, how many areas in Meridian Township would a small business might put in a charging station, but certainly doesn't want an increase in their personal property tax or the real property tax? So I know we've been working with Treasury on some different ideas that aren't contained in this bill. I'm not going to talk about subs or.
Yeah, I just want to point out, we have been working with Treasury. They are generally supportive of the legislation, so long as we work on making sure we keep the school aid fund whole, which is something we're going to work towards doing. There'll be an incoming sub, hopefully, the next time we bring this up. This is just the kind of first version for a conversation. But it is my goal, it is my intent to keep schools held harmless in this conversation. Again, the fiscal impact is for schools is less than $1 million. And so I just want folks to know we are working with stakeholders on this to make it so we keep our schools harmless.
And Madam Chair, if I can say one more thing, one of the challenges, and I don't know the answer to this, I don't know if Treasury is going to testify today, is, what are these charging stations? Are they real? Are they an improvement to real property, which is taxed a different way, or is it personal property? As tax policy members, you all know that personal property tends to be something mobile or movable, a computer, that's historically under the Michigan tax code. Personal property is something kind of fungible and movable. These are heavy-duty investments attached to the ground. So I think it's key kind of how Treasury makes that determination and how this bill will end up, whether it's real or personal property that's going to be taxed.
Okay, thank you. We do have a few questions. Rep. Brixey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. First of all, I want you to know that I have a hybrid car. I do not have a plug-in, but that will be my next car. So I am totally supportive of the EV transition. However, coming from local government and having spent a decade as the treasurer in a township, Meridian Township, I have a lot of questions about this and the ramifications of our transition to EV vehicles is going to be felt for a long time. So I guess my first question is this all charging stations? Is it for only commercial use, residential use, multifamily use? What is the...
So right now, as it's written, it would apply to residential, commercial, industrial. The idea is we want to increase access to these charging stations. I know we have a record amount of NEVI dollars coming in, but those are only going to go in so many areas. If we want to see private investment and residential investment come up, whether it's, you're parking your car because you work for Ford and it's industrial there and they want to offer it to their employees, or even here in our structures, some of our parking spots have it, this would allow it to be exempt. So we're just encouraging across the board implementation of these charging stations.
Okay, so we're saying this bill says that it's exempt from personal property or
So that's a conversation.
real property?
That's a conversation we're having with Treasury right now. I believe that that in conversations with them, they deem it as, and I don't want to speak for them, but they've kind of asked us to classify it as personal property.
The current bill is real and personal, Representative, but it's kind of that ongoing question of what are these? Are
Yeah.
Is it an improvement to real property or is it a piece of personal property? And
Right.
I think trying to get there with Treasury? Because that has huge
So-
ramifications, as you know.
It does, and I guess my concern is that Treasury might not be that broken up about it because personal property and real property are way more impactful to local government than state government. And if you think about, so if it's personal property, then I think, okay, if a strip mall, which was suggested, wants to put one out, they're not going to pay anyway because they're probably below the threshold for personal property, so it isn't going to impact them if they put one in. A car dealership has to have these because you're selling cars and you're selling these things and you want them to be able to run, and so it's really more of the business model that the car industry is going to, and I'm not convinced that that's something that needs to be a tax break.
I wanna add, if you're, and this is just been my experience, right, and seeing new developments in the metro area, most strip mall, I don't want to speak universally here, they're gonna look at accessibility and ease for consumers. Most people won't install just one; they'd install multiples. That's been my
How
experience.
much do they cost?
Well, it depends depends if you're doing it with level 2, if it has a return or not. Depends if you want to try and get your car up to 80% in
What's
20
the
minutes.
expensive one for a quick one?
Fast, high speed, $200,000 minimum.
Yeah.
For one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. For a high-speed one that can get you while you're shopping, have your car charged when you get
So
back.
what about the ones that are down in our
Look in the
parking
structure.
ramp?
I think those are level 2s.
Yeah.
Quite a bit less expensive.
How much are
But like,
those?
I mean, like, you're.
How much are those? I'm asking questions.
60 grand, 60 grand for the charger.
For the
And again, we're leaving out all the capital expense and trying to bring electricity and,
Correct.
and
If you have to
putting
upgrade
these
a
in the
panel or
ground,
something.
which aren't covered in here.
Okay, so if you could allow me to please
Yes, ma'am.
continue, I have a lot of questions, because this is pretty impactful, right? And I know that environmental people are probably out there having a heart attack over my questions, but this is important. I mean, this is important. We're transitioning. I mean, we can see a point in time, perhaps, when we don't have gas stations anymore. We have charging stations, right? And so if I think about that aspect of EV charging stations, then I think, well, do they need a tax break? And is that the direction that we're going? So this is a pretty, I'm sorry, Madam Chair,
Get your question, because we got on a tight schedule here today.
Okay, so I guess one question I have, several questions I have. How many of these do we need to satisfy the direction that we think the car market is going over the next year? How many of these charging stations do we need? And it's okay if you get me this information after the meeting. Statewide. Because that'll help me understand the economic impact. And what are we prepared to do for local units of government? Thank you.
I believe the Department of Transportation and the Governor's Office of Mobility will have those numbers that we're able to get to you, Representative.
Okay, thank you, Rep. Britsky. Now we'll go to Rep. Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Neely, and thank you, Mr. Berriman and Rep. Farhat. And I don't envy the position that the auto dealers are put in. They're under pressure from the manufacturers to make adjustments, and the manufacturers are under mandates, really, from many government jurisdictions. So you made a comment that just caught my attention, that typically when people make a capital improvement to their business, it's a business decision that is hopefully going to grow revenues and profits. But you made the point of you don't want to be punished for making this capital improvement. Are you anticipating that the revenues and the profits are not going to cover the initial costs of these mandates?
That's a good question, Representative. That's a really good question. And I mean, the proof's a little bit in the pudding. Right now, I can tell you, my members, and you know many, getting a little bit of a backlog of EVs sitting on the dealerships right now.
300 days in some instances.
So yes, and that's a conversation I'd like to extend with the tax committee about other ways that we could have tax incentives to improve that and the installation of these charging stations. But I can tell you before the EV push started, we had plenty of dealers that had invested at the manufacturer's behest. I'm not going to call it a mandate. EV charging stations. There were some early EVs before the craze took off. There were some early EV vehicles. Most of those were level 2 chargers, and they ended up being parking spaces to store vehicles. So, as Representative Brixey says, I don't know the direction that this is going to end up going or if it's going to catch fire. But yeah,
Well, like I said, I don't envy the position that the dealers are put in. The Buick dealers, about half of them dropped out rather than make the investment that General Motors was asking. So I see you're between a rock and a hard place. And Rep. Brixey brought up the environmentalists. I'm not even it's nearly immeasurable what CO2 impact will have in transitioning from ICE vehicles to EVs. About 5/1 millionths of 1% of the entire atmosphere each year. So good luck to you.
Thank you.
Rep. Ben Wickram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First question, I guess, is are you familiar with the federal incentive that already exists for installation of EV chargers? Why this route with property compared to doing the federal incentive? And then also to your point, we talked about level 1, level 2, direct. I was going through a box the other day and saw all my different cell phones and iPhones that have had different connectors over the years. Is there an impact here of choosing that connector, and what happens of updates? How easy is it to swap from those types of connectors?
I'll answer that second question about the types of chargers. I think we have a good solution for that definition to remedy it. We're working on that in the second draft and kind of finding a way where we can open it up to allow chargers and let that definition kind of grow with the market and technology. But that's something we're working with Treasury very closely on as well. For that first question, I'll defer to Kurt.
Short story. There were winners and losers, and who qualifies for the EV subsidies? We were a loser.
Charging stations?
Yes, charging station subsidies, yes.
Okay, can you explain that? Maybe a little bit longer version than the short version?
Well,
I know you're hungry, but
well, there were groups that were exempted from qualifying for subsidies for charging stations, and we were on that list.
maybe on the personal rather than the commercial. I believe it's a $1,000 tax credit to install at your home. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And why this method rather than doing that tax incentive, tax credit method?
I mean, for us, we're talking about personal property and real property being taxed and assessed every single year. Right. And if the nickel or the quarter goes heads up on real property, you're talking about increasing the assessment and then that being taxed for the life of that property. On the personal property, sure, there's some depreciation on personal property that business owners are allowed to get, but you're going to be taxing it $200,000, $300,000. I had a dealer this morning, $800,000 in charging stations that he's putting in or will have put in. So I guess it's the long term of $1,000 in your pocket now versus being taxed on $800,000 for 20 years.
Yeah, that's a good solution he's outlined.
Rep. Marking.
Yeah, thank you both. I think when you're working through your next version of this, you know, a lot of people up north put their charging stations, people I know that have EVs have their charging stations in their garage. Mm-hmm. You know, so
And this would apply to the residential homeowners as well.
Right,
So
absolutely.
protect them from a potential, assessment that goes up, and they have to pay more now as a result of that decision.
And a good example is the country of Norway, which leads the planet in promoting EVs. Their incentives are second to none. You might want to take a look at them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your testimony this morning. And we have Chase from Clear Fuel, Michigan, would like to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Chair Neely. Thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to testify today in support of House Bill 4708. And thank you to Representative Farhat for taking leadership in introducing this piece of legislation. My name is Chase Atanasio. I'm a policy analyst with Clean Fuels Michigan. We're a nonprofit trade association working to advance the clean mobility ecosystem here in Michigan. Our member organizations across electric vehicle and EV charging sectors are seeing rapid growth in the electric vehicle as the electric vehicle market expands. Michiganders are making the switch to zero-emission transportation, and supportive infrastructure is needed to support this transition. I offer our support for House Bill 4708 because it will help accelerate the deployment of the EV charging infrastructure that is necessary to achieve Michigan's goals for widespread EV adoption. Access to reliable and convenient charging infrastructure is a key influencer of EV adoption. House Bill 4708 encourages the build-out of critical infrastructure to support the growing number of EVs on Michigan's roads. By assuring property owners that they will not be subject to onerous increases in property taxes after installing a charging station, homeowners and business owners alike can be more confident in their decision to invest in this equipment, spurring investment in the EV charging sector. The growth of EV infrastructure also means more jobs for businesses involved in the manufacturing, installation, operations, and maintenance of these charging stations. House Bill 4708 offers an important step on the path towards achieving 100,000 EV chargers by 2030, a goal set by the My Future Mobility Plan and My Healthy Climate Plan. Industry and state partners are working diligently to expand Michigan's EV charging infrastructure, and this bill offers an opportunity for Michigan to continue to support property owners who are interested in contributing to the expansion of Michigan's EV charging network. In conclusion, House Bill 4708 will support a favorable environment for the deployment of EV charging infrastructure while providing clear guidelines for the taxation and property value assessments process related to charging stations. Thank you again for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you for coming and testifying today. There is no questions.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
I would like to read in some more cards here for House Bill 4708 in support of the bill, but not wishing to speak is Andrew Martin from Myers. Wish not to speak but support the bill is Amy Dom from Michigan Realtors Association. Opposed to the bill is John Lamakia from MML. Also not wishing to speak in support of the bill is Brian from Michigan Auto. In support of the bill is Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Also in support of the bill is Michigan Energy Business Council. Also opposed to the bill is Michigan Township Association. And also opposed to the bill is the Michigan Association of School Boards. Next, we have here to testify on Bill 4361 is Rep. Brayback. She also will have with her Patrick Well O'Brien, Dr. Mona Dosha, David Gillespie. I hope I said that correctly. I'm sorry if I murdered that name. I apologize. And Dr. Randy Song and John Hoffman. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, thank you for allowing us to be here this morning to testify on House Bill 4361. So we are here because of a conversation that happened with Dr. Sung, who you're going to hear from in a little bit. Dr. Sung and I know each other because their youngest son and our oldest are friends and used to play basketball together. And one day, standing in a hallway in between games, Dr. Sung, who is an organ transplantation surgeon, was talking about his work and all that he gets to do, and in my eyes, amazing, daily saving lives. And he said, you know what would be really helpful is the solution that you have in front of you. So that's why we are here. And so I'm excited for you to hear from all of them. So here's what House Bill 4361 does. It allows living organ donors to claim a one-time tax credit for those living organ donor expenses. Now think things like travel, lodging, lost wages, childcare, those kind of expenses. And the other issue that we talked with Treasury about and worked with them is folks will be able to look at basically a 3-year window of when they want to claim this. Because, say again, the original version of the bill said, if you have to claim the credit the year you get the organ donation. What if you get the organ donation on December 30th? Then what? So we worked with Treasury to expand that window, and I'm grateful for their partnership on that. So the final thing is, in order to claim that credit, the living donor would need to submit verification, a verification form around the donation. So here's why this is important. We have almost 2,500 Michiganders who are on the organ transplantation list, and we have thousands upon thousands who are on dialysis right now. Unfortunately, and John may talk about this a little bit, Michigan, just in 2022, we got a grade of an F from the American Kidney Foundation in terms of our ability and access for organ donation. But we've done work on that over the past couple of years. We all have had the opportunity to vote on some of those bills. This is another one, and just this year, our grade has moved from an F to a C. So we're doing better. We are doing better, but there's still more work to be done. And the focus of this is really about removing barriers to organ donation. So this bill really helps us do that. What's happening right now, kind of nationwide, we're seeing that financial reimbursement, whether it's a tax credit or a deduction for those expenses, is happening across the nation. We have 22 other states that are doing something like this. And so we would then align with the numerous other states across the nation who are doing this work if we were able to institute and did institute this up to $10,000 one-time tax credit. So you're going to hear from folks who are live donor or recipients, so we know that they save lives, but it also impacts the wait list that we have. And again, almost 2,500 folks. So we, in this bill, not only have the opportunity to save another Michigander's lives, but we also have the opportunity to support those who selflessly gave the gift of life. So I ask for your support in this House bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Hoffman. I'm the Senior Director of State Policy and Advocacy for the American Kidney Fund. On behalf of all the people we serve in Michigan, including the 23,763 residents currently living with end-stage renal disease, I am testifying today to respectfully request that you support HB 4361. This important bill would provide a one-time tax credit of $10,000 for those non-medical costs incurred by living organ donors. The American Kidney Fund works on behalf of 37 million Americans living with kidney disease and the millions more at risk, and to support people wherever they are in their battle against kidney disease from prevention through post-transplant living. Today in Michigan, there are 2,131 people waiting for a kidney transplant. The wait for a kidney transplant from a deceased donor can last years, and 13 people die every day nationwide waiting for one to come. This is where living donors come in. They save lives with the altruistic act of donating a kidney, and we need to do everything we can to protect them and make more living donation possible. When someone donates a kidney to a relative, a friend, or a stranger, they shorten the transplant waiting list for everyone. In addition, kidneys from living donors generally last longer than kidneys from deceased donors. Over 5,800 living donor kidney transplants were performed last year in the United States, including 141 here in Michigan. When a person decides they want to become a living organ donor, they go through an extensive screening and assessment process to determine their viability. They go through a battery of tests, and the medical costs for the transplant are covered by the organ recipient's medical insurance. But non-medical costs incurred by the donor, including lost wages, transportation, accommodation, and childcare, are currently covered and the responsibility of the donor. At AKF, we hear from patients who believe they have a potential match for donation, who went through the process and were prepared to give of themselves, but when facing an economic or a job-related barrier they couldn't overcome, they had to withdraw. And the patient was back to square one, waiting for that potential match. There has been some concern about the financial targeting of this tax credit by members of the committee, and at present, none of the other 21 states who have passed legislation to remove financial burdens for organ donation have instituted any means testing to the benefit. To date, there have been no nationwide studies about the impact of income on the utilization of benefits that remove financial barriers related to organ donation. While the concern about making sure that tax dollars are utilized in an efficient and most targeted fashion are understandable and warranted, we currently have insufficient data to know if restricting this credit would impact the number of new organ donations. In a journal article by the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, Halpern showed that if a $10,000 disincentive is removed, there would be an estimated 61% increase in living donation. This bill alone will not solve the shortage of available organ donors for the large and growing waiting list. But as we continue to build on recent successes and work to improve the climate for living organ donations in the state, AKF believes and studies show that removing financial burdens for living donors will lead to an increase in organ donations. With this piece of legislation, Michigan would join the 21 other states who provide a tax credit for living organ donors, and for these reasons, we're hopeful for your support on this legislation that could help improve the lives of those fighting organ failure. Thank you.
Madam Chair Neely and members of the House Tax Policy Committee. I'm David Galbensky, and I'm a grateful recipient of a living liver transplant from my brother-in-law, Mark Dybus. And I'm honored to be here to have the opportunity to present this testimony on behalf of fellow Michiganders that are living organ donors and the transplant recipients like me that have been given a second chance at life because of them. We heard about kidney being a critical need. Liver is the other organ that can be transplanted because you can donate a portion of your liver when you're alive, and it regenerates both in me as the recipient and in the living organ donor, my brother-in-law, Mark. So I wholeheartedly support House Bill 4361 to provide for that one-time tax credit. I look forward to sharing my personal experience regarding my living liver transplant and my subsequent advocacy journey to pay that gift of life forward by eliminating the financial, economic, and emotional barriers for future living donors in Michigan. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. It was a beautiful fall September evening in 2019 when my wife Lynn, who happens to be right out here, and I arrived at my brother-in-law's Mark's house. I was getting sicker and sicker as my rare autoimmune disease continued its attack on my liver. Now, I was anxiously waiting on that transplant list for the availability of a liver from a deceased donor. And John talked about it. 13 people a day on that transplant list die waiting for an organ from a deceased donor. Now, when we arrived at their home, we entered the living room, and I was joined there with Mark's wife, Karen, which is Lynn's younger sister. And Mark had us both sit down and, after catching up a bit, said, "Dave, I have some great news for you. I'm going to be your living donor." How does late November, early December look to get this done, right? And now you can only imagine the feeling of relief that overwhelmed me, the tears of joy that came down my face, and the bear hugs that were given. Now, and of course, I let Mark know that my calendar might be free on those dates that he had in mind. So in late November 2019, at Henry Ford Health in Detroit, Mark donated that portion of his liver to me and saved my life. He's my angel on earth, my hero, and is really the only reason that I'm able to be here today to give that testimony. Now, as this committee is aware, there's an acute need, and I won't go into the numbers. Representative Brayback has gone into it as well as John. And you understand the transition that we've gone from an F to a C. Tremendous progress. So I'd like to personally thank all of you for your individual yes vote, all of you, on the House floor on October 18th, 2023, when the House collectively passed Senate Bill 384 by a vote of 104 to 6 to protect living donors from any discrimination by insurance companies toward living donors related to life, disability, and long-term care insurance. I will never forget that day. I was seated in the House gallery with the bill's sponsor, Senator Hertel, watching that board go up, start to turn green, right? All of the names up there making things happen. I'm trying to get my paper here. Can you help me with that, John? Up on the board. Now, throughout all of 2023, Mark and I had zealously advocated for the passage of that bill, working collaboratively with Senator Hertel and his team. And as all of your names sitting in this room and an overwhelming majority of your colleagues lit up green on that board, I really became very emotional, realizing that our dream was soon to be realized, that ensuring that future donors like Mark wouldn't ever have to deal with the anxiety and uncertainty that their insurance coverage could be negatively impacted when contemplating saving the life of another Michigander by becoming a living donor. And that's what we're talking about as well with this bill. Now, the impact of that bill signing into law on November 7th is already positively impacting Michiganders. There's been 13 living donor transplants in 2024, 11 kidney, 2 liver, and more is coming through the pipeline. So it's a critical thing. From my own lived experience in living organ donation policy, each and every vote has the potential to be a life or death matter. And this is one of those votes. I thank Representative Brayback for bringing this bill forward. I've enjoyed working with your team on it. It's going to eliminate another financial barrier that currently has the potential to deter Michiganders from becoming living donors, like my brother-in-law, Mark. We know that you're going to incur those expenses, and we need to eliminate those. So I oftentimes ponder, what if Mark's situation did not allow him to overcome this financial barrier when he was in a place for him to become a living donor? Would I even be here today? I don't know the answer to that. Would I have the opportunity to see my daughter and her fiance, Patrick, getting married? They're going to get married in June of this year. And I'm so grateful that I'm alive right now to have that opportunity to potentially see them. And would I even have the ability to be an active and productive Michigander in the coming years and get that chance to enjoy many more pure Michigan summer sunsets that we all love? So as you and your colleagues assess whether to support this one-time tax credit, I ask you to consider that each dollar of that tax credit goes toward a Michigander that is a hero, that shouldn't have to face financial barriers to save a life. That saving the life of a recipient like me and returning them to being an active Michigander and contributing to the economy and the vitality of our state. And most importantly, when you're sitting on that transplant list, providing hope, knowing that we as Michiganders, we live in a state that values us and prioritizes supporting access to life-saving healthcare options by implementing effective health and tax policies. And here's what's cool. When HB 4361 gets turned into law this year, we'll not only have gone from an F to a C, we'll have gone from an F to a B. That's a big jump in one legislative session, and it shows how the legislature here on a bipartisan basis is supporting effective health policy and tax policy to remove those barriers. So I sit before you and thank you in gratitude for allowing me to be here as a Michigander and provide this testimony. And I wholeheartedly support this bill, and I hope you will as well, because in this type of vote, for those on the transplant list waiting for an organ right now, it truly is a life and death matter. So Madam Chair and the Tax Policy Committee, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here, and I'm so glad that your brother-in-law gave you that liver. I gave my sister a kidney. So this is a great bill, Rep. Brayback, and thank you for bringing it forth. We do have a few more testimonies online. We're going to get those, and then we'll ask all the questions after that. Thank you. Which one? Dr. Sung?
Oh, so me, okay. I want to thank Madam Chair and the members of the Tax Policy Committee for allowing me to testify in support of this bill. My name is Randy Sung. I'm a transplant surgeon at the University of Michigan. I'm also the surgical director of kidney transplantation at the University of Michigan Transplant Program, and have had a lot of service with Gift of Life Michigan locally. I can confirm that Representative Braybeck and my sons played basketball together. And while I confess that I actually did not remember the conversation that we had about the contents of this bill until Felicia reminded me of that. The most important thing is that Representative Braybeck remembered, which comes as no surprise since she is such a passionate advocate for organ donation and transplantation, for which we in the transplant community are incredibly grateful. So I'm testifying in support of this bill, which allows an organ donor to claim a one-time tax credit towards unreimbursed live donation expenses. As you are hearing, this bill is supported by many professionals and organizations in the kidney care and transplant communities. Kidney transplant is the best treatment option for patients with kidney failure, and not only improves length of life, but also quality of life. In addition, kidney transplant is also highly cost-effective compared with dialysis and saves taxpayer dollars. Kidney transplants from living donors last approximately twice as long as kidneys from deceased donors, and increases the number of patients who receive a kidney transplant overall by allowing a kidney from a deceased donor to go to another person who needs it, who may not be fortunate enough to have a living donor. Living kidney donation is broadly accepted by the medical community and the public due to the low medical risk to the donor and the substantial benefit to the recipient. And in fact, prior living donors also report high rates of satisfaction with their decision to donate. So not only are they doing something great for the person that receives it, but they are actually gaining something for themselves as well. As you have heard, donors may have to incur expenses related to travel, lost wages, and dependent care expenses, which can approach over $10,000. This current bill offers a tax credit to cover these expenses if not reimbursed by other entities such as grants, employers, insurance policies, etc. This credit would be offset by the cost savings to recipients from the transplant, and also by a likely increase in living donation as a result of removing these disincentives to donation. Living organ donors are heroes who are willing to undergo surgery and permanently donate a body part or tissue to help someone in need. In fact, in my practice, one of the most rewarding parts of my job is to share the good news to families of living organ donors and their recipients about their successful surgeries, just because of the sheer joy that they feel. It's a really special feeling. It's true of any transplants, but it's especially true for living donors because of all the anticipation and hope that is built up. This bill will remove financial disincentives and not only help current donors, but may prompt others to donate. We need to do more to protect them, particularly in Michigan, and passing this bill would be a step in the right direction. As has been mentioned, of the 41 states with state taxation, 20 have similar laws in place to provide a tax credit for living donors. And it's important for our state to join the ranks of other states who recognize the great gift that these heroes have provided. I want to thank you once again to Madam Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on behalf of this bill.
Thank you so much. And we're going to hold all the questions to after we hear from Patrick Will O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee, for considering this bill. I'm Patrick Wells O'Brien from Gift of Life, Michigan, our state's federally designated organ procurement organization. We are responsible for the recovery of organ and tissue from deceased donors. And as you heard today, there's two ways that people can receive a transplant: from deceased donation and living donation. Gift of Life Michigan, our population hasn't increased, but we have been able to increase deceased donation, but not to the degree that meets the need. Each day, as has previously been mentioned, people die waiting for a life-saving organ. And of the 2,400 plus people waiting for a life-saving organ in Michigan, 2,000 of them or more are waiting for a kidney. And we think bills like this will enable our country and our state to get to a point where no one has to die waiting for a life-saving organ. Even though we've been able to increase deceased donation, living donation has not increased, hovering around 6,000 to 7,000 nationally each year. This legislation is so critical to remove the barriers, relieve the pressure on our state registry and on deceased donation to meet this critical need. And Gift of Life Michigan strongly supports it and encourages members to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you for testimony today. We do have a few questions. Oh, yes.
I'm here with the Michigan National Kidney Foundation of Michigan on this same topic.
Eric?
Yes.
Oh, please come up.
Thank you. I just thought it might be more efficient if I got that out of the way.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you also for your gift of life. Hi, Julie. Kidney donation has been a part of my life for a very long time. My mother received 2 living donor kidneys before she passed a number of years back, and my closest friend received a living donor. And I, too, have received a kidney from a living donor. I live in East Lansing, and I'm a kidney patient advocate here on behalf of National Kidney Foundation. I was fortunate to have received a kidney donation from my wife, Andrea Ditchman, in 2001. She works in enforcement at Lara and unfortunately couldn't join us today. I grew up in Port Huron. Andrea was from nearby Goodles. We met in high school soon after I found out that I had kidney disease with both kidneys working at 50%. There was no diagnosis. 20 years later, Andrea and I were married and have, at the time, had a 1.5-year-old son, Jacob. Within 3 months, I suddenly lost the full use of my kidneys, end-stage kidney disease. In order to live, I needed a dialysis or kidney transplant. I had an emergency start into dialysis. Andrea immediately tested and was a match. 4 months later, she gave me one of her kidneys at the University of Michigan. Surgery went well for both of us. She was discharged in a few days and went home to be with Jake. Luckily, we had relatives come to town to watch our son while we underwent the surgeries. She came back the next day to see me and fell ill. This was related to the kidney transplant, and it would turn out that she needed extra days to recover. The typical time of recovery for kidney donation is 2 to 3 weeks, with resumption of full activities a week later. These complications added additional week of recovery for Andrea. In her case, the law firm which she worked at covered the extra time, but this isn't the case for many would-be organ donors. For them, any time off could mean no income. Money out of pocket can unfortunately become a major hurdle to living organ donations. Even for those most willing to donate a kidney to a loved one, friend, or a stranger, the decision becomes complicated when it means rent may not be able to be paid due to lost wages or other expenses related to donating, like travel and childcare. It's now 23 years post-donation for Andrea and I. And I was sitting next to David and Senator Kevin Hertel on the day you all passed, up in the balcony, and the day you all passed the Living Donor Protection Act. And that also was an incredible day for me. We had been working with the Michigan National Kidney Foundation of Michigan with my Senator Curtis Hertel prior to that, and we did get the LDPA introduced in his session. Unfortunately, we did not get it passed in that session, but still 2 years later, or less than about 2 years later, it was passed, and it is a remarkable feat for us on our way of becoming much better suited for supporting our living donors. So I'm in full support of 4361 for removing the roadblocks for some of the expenses that may arise, providing significant support and helping Michiganders to donate the gift of life. We need to encourage organ donation. 1 in 7 Michiganders are at risk for kidney disease, and many of them need a kidney transplant, may need a kidney transplant to continue to live their productive lives. There's no cure for kidney disease. We have those 3 options: do nothing, transplant, or dialysis. And for those of us who are on dialysis, transplant is the gold standard. For me, unfortunately, that transplant did fail soon after. And so I've been on dialysis for 24 years, but I do home nocturnal, but that doesn't detract from the fact that we need to have more incentives for people to donate kidneys so that Michiganders can have productive lives ahead of us. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We have one more online, and that's Dr. Mona Dosha.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to all of you, to Madam Chair Neely and members of Tax Committee. I am Mona Doshi, the Medical Director for the Living Donor Kidney Program at University of Michigan, and have been in practice since 2005. This topic is so dear and near to my heart. It started with a patient who made me realize that this is such a big obstacle for the people who want to help others. So there was a mom who wanted to help her daughter. It was a loved one, and she hesitated after she heard that she might have to be off work for 4 to 6 weeks, and she had no means, to support herself through recovery, and because she would lose income during that time. So that made me think we need to do more, whether it is living related donor or unrelated. We need to support our donors who are more than willing to help their loved ones. So I'm testifying with that story. I'm testifying in support of House Bill 4361, proposed by Representative Brayback. The bill allows organ donor to claim one-time tax credit towards unreimbursed live donation expenses. And as others have mentioned, there are 24,000 Michiganders who are battling kidney failure, and 16,000 of them are on dialysis. Patients on dialysis have a very high mortality rate of around 20%. So in other words, if 10 people were to start dialysis today, at the end of 5 years, only 5 of them would be alive. However, if they undergo a kidney transplant, then if 10 people received a kidney transplant today, 8 of them would be alive at the end of 5 years. So kidney transplant is truly life-saving. In addition, these folks, as others have mentioned, these folks can go back, return to work, and contribute back to society, can have children. Young women who are on dialysis cannot start a family. However, after kidney transplant, they can have a family, go back to work, go travel, go back to school, and be a meaningful citizen. In addition, kidney transplant also saves taxpayer dollars. Kidney dialysis costs around $60,000 a year. The upfront cost of kidney transplant is quite high at $100,000 because of the surgery and hospitalization. But thereafter, the cost of kidney transplant is just to provide medicines, which is around $10,000 a year. So after 3 years, transplant is cost effective, right? The state is expected to save around $146,000 for every transplant done. Now, dialysis is usually covered by Medicare, and for patients who don't have Medicare, Medicaid, the state Medicaid picks up that tab. So this is a big savings even for the state. Kidney transplant, therefore, is a win-win, not only for patients, for providers who see their patients do better, live longer, and have a meaningful life, but even for the state and the government. Now, as mentioned before, kidney transplant from a living donor is far, far better than a kidney transplant from a deceased donor, because kidneys from living donors last much longer than kidneys from deceased donor. Also, these surgeries can be planned, and the patient could completely avoid dialysis and get a transplant from a living donor. Now, as mentioned previously, the living donation is accepted on the premise that it carries minimal risk to the donor. The cost of the surgery and the evaluation is covered by the recipient insurance. However, the donors still incur expenses with regards to travel to the transplant center, lodging, lost wages, as I described with the story of my patient, and also lost, they have to have arrangements for childcare, dependent care. A study in 2022 showed that on an average, the living donors incur $5,000 in lost wages, incur expenses of $5,000 in childcare, and $3,000 for travel. So the current proposed amount of $10,000 seems to be around the right amount. Also, I want to note, thank you for Representative Brayback to modify this bill because the evaluation donation do not occur in the same calendar year. It could take up to a year or more for the surgery to occur. So to spread this bill out on a span of 3 years is really ideal. As of 2023, there were 160 living kidney donors in Michigan. So one-time tax credit to the donors may cost the state $1.5 million. But however, it will definitely lower the Medicaid spending, which is around $1.5 billion with a B, to manage these patients with kidney disease. This tax bill would not only help the current donors, but also perhaps increase the number of kidney donors down the road. As the state, we are facing a declining number of living donors. We used to see around 200 living kidney donors, and now we're down to 150, 160. So, and removing any kind of financial disincentive would perhaps increase living kidney donation. Also, I want to bring out a fact that the landscape of living donors has changed recently. Previously, most of the living donors used to be family members. More recently, half of the living donors are unrelated to the recipients. We are not only seeing in our clinics people wanting to donate to the friend, to their coworker, to the neighbors, but now with the advent of social media, we have people, hearing stories on Facebook and wanting to help somebody that they don't know at all. And we need to protect these heroes who are trying to help improve life of others. And we are seeing humanity at the very best. And we hope that we can save not just Michiganders' lives, but also the donors who are willing to put their life at risk to help somebody else. As mentioned previously, there are 2,000 people waiting on the wait list to receive a kidney transplant. Last year, only 500 or so got a kidney from a deceased donor. In other words, only 1 in 4 Michiganders on the transplant wait list got a kidney, and living kidney donation is one of the ways to bridge the gap. Again, we should join the 20 other states who have laws to provide one-time tax credit to the donors for unreimbursed costs related to donation. Passing House Bill 4361 would be the step in right direction. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming on and testifying today. We do have a few questions. The first one is from Representative Tisdale.
Just real briefly for Representative Braybeck, there's an old saying, no good deed goes unpunished, right? So we're not looking to reward people with this, but simply relieve them of part of the burden.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Price.
Thank you for bringing this before us. Having an opportunity to relieve the barrier and support folks who decide to become living organ donors is fantastic. I'm wondering what else? What are the other things that our state can do to reduce barriers and encourage and support more people who make this decision?
I'll start, Representative Price. Thanks for the great question. We think a next logical step that I'm working with Senator Hertel on in this legislative session is the employer tax credit side. The American Kidney Fund has 7 key criteria that derives the grading scale of an A through an F, and I'll let John answer the rest of those. But the next one we think is a logical step is an employer tax credit, and we'll be bringing that bill forward momentarily. We have the first draft with Senator Hertel, and we're getting it to the next level, and we'll get to be presenting it in front of this group as well, because that dual path will eliminate the vast majority of financial barriers to living donors. And it would be beautiful to see that happen in one legislative session, because it would send a very strong message about the policy that we're enacting here in Michigan to support living organ donation. Because as I mentioned, every vote in living organ donation is in life and death matter. So I'll be pleased to turn it over to John to articulate the other criteria, but you're going to see more coming out of Senator Tell's office.
Dave covered the honestly, he's done a great job. The only other element that we're looking at is job protected leave from a private employer, but that goes right along with that. So making sure that if you do need to leave your job to either become a donor or be a recipient, you make sure that you can come back to your job. Or in the case of this bill passing, you're compensated over that time period. So both sides of that equation are made whole. So that's really the main thing. Dave is right on top of it. F to a C, and this would put us to a B. So.
Okay, just before we move on to our next question, Dr. Doshi would like to chime in on this.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think I'm asking for a little bit more, but I'll make a case. So the kidney disease predominantly affects people of color. And the living donor rates are particularly low among that community. And, the financial disincentives do become a big problem for them, is one of the concerns, right? So these people, some of my patients, they don't make enough to even owe state, taxes amounting to $10,000. And they may lose income and child wages. So maybe there is a 2.0 version of this bill where we are focused on helping those who need, help with regards to financial disincentives the most, and find ways to help people of color, people who are limited by financial resources, to remove any disincentives and allow them to help their loved ones.
Thank you so much. Next question comes from Representative Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, panelists. I think the doctor hit it right on the nail where I was going with this conversation. Having a mother that died with renal failure and a brother that is a kidney transplant recipient. From what I've written down here, 15% of Americans have chronic kidney disease, but African Americans, Black Americans only make up 13% of the population, but 35% of the kidney cases. And it's definitely socioeconomically based. So when we offer an incentive that will, help Black Americans, African Americans get the needed care that they need, it's critical. It's a life or death situation for us. So I applaud this legislation. You don't know the impact it has. I live in a community that diabetes is rampant and kidney disease is rampant and amputations and all the things that could be prevented if we had the resources to address them. And I feel this legislation is nailing it head on. So I really appreciate that. And on behalf of my mother and my brother, thank you.
All right, this will be our last question. Rep. Britzy.
Thank you for the information. I appreciated the meeting that I had before the committee hearing in order to get some of the questions I had answered or attempt to. So one of the things that, that I'm always concerned about are there unintended consequences, and who is receiving a tax break? And as we look at the policy, who needs it? Are we giving tax breaks to people who don't need it? I had requested information about the demographics of folks who are the organ donors, living donors, to see if there was, if there is a pattern of our people who give wealthy or, and unfortunately that information apparently doesn't exist and isn't collected in order to answer that question. But I think something I heard you say, one of you gentlemen say, really begins to address it. What was the number again that you said of how many people begin the process and then stop because they can't afford? What was that number?
If it was me, I was speaking sort of anecdotally about. Was it you, Dave?
Him then? No.
I did not.
Did one of you say how many people turn away from donation?
I was just speaking about the stories that we hear. Dr.
Yeah,
Doshi,
I was also referring to the story about a mom wanting to help her daughter, but couldn't do so because she couldn't afford to be off work for 4 weeks. And I think you're thinking in the right direction. We want to help the ones who need the weakest link in our society, which is helping people of color and those who have limited financial resources. So with passage of such tax, one-time tax credit may perhaps allow some of these folks who are worried about effect on the income, perhaps more, and we might see increased number of living donors among those people.
Okay, we'd like to thank you all. Yes, we're going to have to get ready to wrap up. We're on a very time sensitive right now. So, Rep. Bracey, any other questions that you may have? Hopefully you'll be able to reach out to Representative Brayback, and she'll be able to give you that rest of that information. And we're going to finish up the comments with you.
So I agree with Dr. Doshi, and I think it's a great question, Representative Brixey. However, when we think of the altruistic kidney donor and how Dr. Doshi mentioned that we're getting more altruistic kidney donors as we're seeing things shift, those kidneys go to anybody that is on the list, and so I guess what I would just say. If when my wife first gave me her kidneys, we weren't in the upper socioeconomic bracket, but I do now have folks who are in the upper socioeconomic bracket, and there was a study in 2018 that did show on a small study that many of our donors are in that bracket. I think it's a kidney. If you have the expenses, those expenses should qualify for the tax credit, even as we look for additional incentives to increase the amount of kidneys from my children are black, from the black community, because I'm concerned. My son's pre-diabetic. So I guess just that's my feeling on this, is that we need to get as many kidneys available from both ways. And so I would hope that socioeconomics doesn't come into play when we talk about this bill.
Thank you so much. And I thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much. Now we'll have Representative Price offered a substitute H2 to House Bill 4361. Mr. Clerk, would you take the vote, please?
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Neely?
Yes.
Representatives Farhat?
Yes.
Brixey?
Yes.
Carter?
Brenda.
Yes.
Witset?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Van Workum?
Pass.
Markkinen?
Pass.
Outman?
Pass.
Tisdale?
Pass.
Hoadley?
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays, and 5 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you. Representative Carter makes a motion to report House Bill 4361. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Neely?
Yes.
Representatives Farhat?
Yes.
Brixey?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Witset?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Van Workum?
Yes.
Markkinen?
Yes.
Outman?
Pass.
Tisdale?
Yes.
Hoadley?
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 11 yeas, 0 nays, 1 pass. HB 4361's reported recommendation, substitute H2.
Thank you. Seeing there's no absent members, there being no further business before this committee stands adjourned.